Hello, my name is Isaac Brickman, and welcome to Office Hours. Each episode, I will talk to a professor about a topic that is relevant to you. On each show, the guest will have a different perspective on the topic. The goal is twofold. First, I want to make academia more accessible, applicable, and exciting to everyone, including non-academic audiences. I also want to help dissolve the boundaries between disciplines by taking a more holistic approach to learning. I would like to welcome Alina Parker to our fourth episode of Office Hours. Alina is a full-time lecturer in the writing program and the Russian, Eurasian, and Polish studies program at UMass Amherst. Her research interests include post-socialism, Eastern Europe, political contention, and far-right politics. She is originally from Kharkiv, Ukraine, and I took a class on Russia's invasion of Ukraine that she taught last semester. Welcome to the show, Alina. How is UMass treating you?
Hi, Isaac. Very good to see you, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Yeah, classes have started and the weather is nice and it's pretty good.
All right, great. Well, I think the best way to get into this heavy topic would probably be to just jump right in. So I'm gonna go for it. Why do you think Russia invaded Ukraine?
So, to me, this is an incredibly difficult question. And the reason why I started teaching the class about it a few years ago is because I was trying to figure out the answer or answers to this question. But I was thinking about it. I was thinking how I could kind of sum up as concisely as I can. And here's what I came up with is I think there are two explanations, and there's sort of the two layers, the thin one and the thick one. And the thin one is just that Russia has an aging leader who is, was serving his fourth term in 2022, and now it's his fifth term, and who has lost most of his domestic and international legitimacy. At some point in 2020, he changed the Russian constitution, which allowed him to run for another 2 terms. And his approval ratings have been falling. And this war was just an opportunity to regroup for himself and restructure the government, restructure the media sphere, and basically just exercise a different level of control over the country. And we know that countries at war tend to rally around the flag, rally around the leader, and with sort of the degree of oppression that is now normal in Russia, Putin is in control. So the thick explanation has really to do with the means for kind of doing this, right? So how can he stay in power? How can he justify staying in power? And basically, these potential justifications have to be shared by at least some of the people, of the Russian people, right? So he drew on anti-Westernism and more specifically on anti-Americanism that has been a part of the political culture, and which Putin himself has also encouraged for decades that he had already been in power. And the second thing was appeal to Russian imperial greatness and to the idea that Russia was bigger in the past and that it lost its influence and the lands unfairly. And again, this is where anti-Americanism, anti-Westernism again comes into play because this is who is responsible. Um, and basically, Ukraine is this major piece of this imperial imaginary. And without Ukraine, there is this idea that without Ukraine, Russia is not complete. And here's the case for the war.
Well, I love how you conceptualized it into the thin and thick reasons. I find it interesting because both reasons don't really seem to be in the interests of the Russian people. And yet, independent polling suggests that most Russians are not against the war. In your class, you said that Russians broadly fall into three groups with respect to the war. There's the pro war, neutral or disengaged, and the anti war. I want to kind of go over these groups. And I also want to start off with the pro war Russians. A lot of them are part of the Z community. What is the Z community and how does your research relate to it?
Thank you. So war supporters tend to be the people who share some of these ideas used to justify the war, such as anti-Westernism and this nostalgia for the imperial grandeur. And the Z community or the most active supporters, um, um, they have made Telegram, the social media platform, their political hub. This is where they're running blogs and interact with each other. They post videos and daily posts and start discussions and have video streams. And so there is all of this activity. And unlike um, most ordinary people who might have some ideas about Russian greatness or about the West kind of scheming against Russia, these people are a lot more invested into these ideas, invested to the point that they think this war is very important and they want to help to win this war in any way they can. And so the people who I would call the Z community are the people who are actually working actively to bring this victory closer. So they tend to be frontline volunteers who fundraise for the front, who maybe work on manufacturing drones or um, making camouflage nets or maybe fundraising and buying the necessary gear and equipment and clothes and all these kind of things. And combatants themselves, the soldiers on the front lines, the military bloggers and analysts and propagandists and artists and sort of all of this kind of uh, basically community that has built around the war. And they, it's not that there is a hard boundary between these people and the broader population, right? Because they have audiences, and these audiences may also, contribute to the fundraising efforts and maybe to volunteering efforts, etc. And so it's really hard to say how large this community is. But we know that there are, maybe 600, 700 Telegram blogs that these people are running. And some of them have 500,000 subscribers, 1 million subscribers. But the majority of them may have a few thousand. So not all of them are large. And I have been researching this community since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So,
Well, that's really interesting. When I was in your class and we were learning about the Z community, one of the things that really struck me was that the Z community isn't completely behind the military strategy of Russia pertaining to Ukraine. Why is that? And why is Russia okay with this type of dissent? Because I don't feel like Russia is usually okay with dissent.
yeah. Well, the reason why they are often critical of the Russian government and especially the Russian military command is that they don't think that this war is fought efficiently enough. And this is something that anybody can see because the war has been ongoing for almost 4 years. In February, it will be 4 years. And yet, with the exception of the first year, no significant territories have been taken. And all the lands that have been taken are basically just the sites of, complete ruination. There's nothing left. It's lunar landscape. And it is hard to see this as a victory for those who are fighting this war or helping to win this war. And they have been critical for a while since the fall of the first year of the war, when the first big wave of criticism began. And the Russian government has been trying to manage that in different ways. So first with maybe just some quiet threats, um, because they have to be balanced in their response, because these are the people who are willing to fight and who are willing to contribute and fundraise, etc., and create narratives around this war that are appealing to a larger population. The government propaganda is not very efficient at that, and is not, this war does not really have that much appeal for the broad populations. And so they need these people, they need these Z community activists, but at the same time, they cannot allow too much dissent. And so the first big wave of crackdowns was after the Wagner Group mutiny, the Yevgeny Prigozhin's mutiny in June 2023. As we know, Prigozhin himself was eliminated in August that year. Another very loud critic, Igor Strelkov, was jailed later that summer. And a few other smaller figures who were very openly critical were also jailed. Others were silenced with threats, but the information about the threats has circulated on Telegram. So we know that a lot of these active critics have been told that they will be next. And so they began to tone down their criticism. And then many were co-opted. So the government arranged several public meetings with military correspondents, with people who have large audiences on Telegram and beyond. And Putin met with them. And their coverage of the war has changed, even though they still feel pressure to because they feel loyalty to their sources on the ground. So they still feel they need to be more critical and to sort of convey their grievances to the larger audience, but they have to be very careful about it. And so I think now there is a new stage of the crackdown, but it has taken a new form. You may have heard that Russia has mostly blocked calls on WhatsApp and Telegram. So it is no longer possible to call someone in Russia on WhatsApp or Telegram and have a conversation because it keeps breaking up and there's kind of this robotic sound. The voices are distorted, and so it's impossible to talk. And so basically, you can still send messages, but you can only talk if you use a VPN. And there is a new messenger that Russia now is actively promoting. It's called Max. And this messenger is fully integrated into the Russian security services. So they say, and kind of government services. So through this messenger, you can access like different government services. You could apply for a new passport, so everything is going to be built into this one messenger. It will be the one and only. Right. But what the experts say about the way that it will function is that basically all the information, voice or text, will be in this one database that is searchable and easily accessible to the FSB. So yeah, so that's a new stage of managing managing the dissent.
All right. Well, that doesn't sound too great for Russians who are trying to dissent from the government. But even with this very small opportunity to dissent in that kind of authoritarian state, it it still reminds me of far right communities in the US. For instance, with the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, some right wing commentators have pressed or are pressing the DOJ to release the files. They clearly aren't satisfied with how the Trump administration is handling this scandal. And like people in the Z community, they're not really directly criticizing Trump, but you could tell that they sort of have a problem with how it is being handled. And with that said, others are acting like there's nothing wrong with Trump's handling of the scandal. And this is all despite a barrage of lies and contradictions, including Trump saying he was not told his name was in the files, and the White House conceding he was in the files, but he did nothing wrong. So I just find that the Trump supporters who are reacting negatively to the Epstein scandal is revealing on a psychological level. To me, it shows that despite constant propaganda, even the cult like supporters of a leader have the potential to change their minds. And I know you said that the Z community is in a new stage. They're having to be more careful about how they are critical of the Russian government. But do you think that they have any potential to change their minds about the invasion itself? Or do you think that they're always going to be all in on the invasion and just simply save their criticism for the strategy?
Yeah, I think in many ways what's happening in Russia is similar to what you're describing happening here in the US. And I think different figures are these activists dealing with this challenge in different ways, right? So uh, how do we criticize a leader that we're afraid of? And can we openly dissent? And how do we feel about the project, right? That is the big project of this leader, but that is not going well. And so I think one important thing to note here is that the war support and government support are two different things in Russia, right? And actually, like they are sort of moving maybe in different directions. So someone who is very actively, passionately pro-war and really wants a victory in this war is most likely more critical of the government than someone who is maybe hoping for some kind of just some kind of a resolution to this, right? So let's just figure out a way to wrap this up. So they might be more loyalist and seeing Putin as someone who is kind of negotiating a complicated situation and wants to bring it to a close, but in a way that would be beneficial for Russia and Russia's position on the world arena, right? And so they might be cheering, to Putin meeting with Xi and being kind of welcome in different countries of the world and traveling to Alaska, and they see it as a victory. But people for whom the priority is the war, they might interpret all of these things in a negative way, and you see that in these recent weeks on Telegram. Um, because the active war supporters, many of them, the most active ones, are really afraid of negotiations and concessions. But then there's also a large number of war supporters who are tired, and they think that at this point we cannot win the war, and we need a break. And so this is a kind of division that is emerging within this pro-war community. I think neither faction is happy. Both of them are angry, and both of them do think that this war is important to win for these, complicated and distorted kind of weird reasons of theirs, but they neither of them are really friends of the government necessarily, because both of them are deeply disappointed. But some of them are changing their minds and they are hoping for some kind of a pause.
Wow, it's very interesting. Stepping away from the Z community, there's also a large portion of Russians who are neutral or disengaged from the war. It's kind of hard for me to believe as an American that you have this big war going on and a huge segment of the population just doesn't really do anything. So why are so many Russians neutral or disengaged from the war? Can you explain that?
Yeah. Well, it's not that they don't know about it or don't care about it. They know and they care. And I think with time, um, probably every citizen of Russia has felt some effects of this war in one way or another. If you live in the regions close to the Ukrainian border, then most likely you have seen war with your own eyes, and there are kind of hostilities on both sides of the border, which is, of course, the kind of the natural outcome of any war. But then, people in Moscow have been under drone attacks. People who tried to fly out of Moscow airports have had to wait for hours for a drone attack to end to be able to fly out, and this is just now a regular occurrence. Um, and also, the prices are going up. There are all of these other things that are affecting people in different ways. But regardless of what these people think, they know full well that there's nothing they can do. And so this makes people just kind of turn the other way and try to not think about it. And if you ask them, what they think about the war. Like you said, polling shows that the majority of people support the war, you know. So if you ask this random person in the streets how they feel about it, they'll say that they support it. And again, this is above all, this is the pragmatic response, you know, and the fact that this person just said yes doesn't mean that they support it, doesn't mean that they are against it. It could actually mean anything. And it could be really complicated. And if you try to have a long conversation with them, you would most likely hear some reasons for the war and some reasons against the war, and some explanations of who is to blame, and there would be a whole range of actors, and Ukraine will be to blame, and Zelensky will be to blame, and the Americans will be to blame, and maybe the Russian elites will be to blame, you know. And so you might see this kind of complex picture that they construct, but ultimately the majority of people would feel that it's complicated, it's too big, there's nothing we can do, and it's not coming to an end. So all we can do is just pretend that nothing is happening. And so one of the Russian government's kind of smarter moves has been not to announce another round of mobilization of military drafts. So the first round took place in September 2022, and a large number of Russian men fled across the border. Since then, the Russian government has changed the system, the drafting system. So now there is an electronic system in place. So if there is in the future another round of mobilization, then the men who are drafted will receive a notification on their phones, and even if they don't receive it, it will still be considered that they received it. So if in the past the man had to get an actual drafting notice in their hands, only then it was delivered, and now they have to appear, and then there's punishments, there's certain penalties attached to the failure to appear. Now it's not like that. So you've been drafted, 1 week later you will be penalized, and the penalties are considerable. Your rights are seriously curtailed if you do not actually appear at the drafting office. So yeah, so what people are happy about is that they have a choice to go fight in the war or not. The army mostly functions as a contract-based army. The people who choose to go and enlist are paid considerable amounts of money. For many, this is a way out of poverty, a way to pay off their debts, to support their family. And because the majority do not follow what's actually happening on the front lines, they don't know what the experience will be like. And most of them, when they sign these contracts, they don't even realize that the contracts they don't have an end points. So even if you sign a 6 months contract, it will be automatically extended after 6 months. But it is public information, but these people are not told that this is how it works at the drafting office when they sign the contract. And so often they realize only after they have signed. And yeah, and the majority just, the life is harder in many ways, but they can mostly avoid thinking about the war, and they do.
Wow, that's scary to think that I could, as a 22-year-old man, just get a notification on my phone and have to go to war. That's kind of frightening. And sticking to this neutrality and disengaged community, for one more question, do you think that Russia's censorship of social media platforms like X and Instagram contributes to um, so much of Russia's disengagement about the war?
Um, I think that it's not, at this point, it's not a major factor, I would say. The war, in the US, people tend to think that the war began in 2022, but for the Ukrainians, it began in 2014 when Crimea was annexed and when the conflict in eastern Ukraine and Donbass began. And At that point, the Russian media system began to transform, and television, especially, began to kind of create this world, this different worlds in which Ukraine was controlled by Nazis, and these brave volunteers went to Eastern Ukraine to help fight Nazism, and that the Russian government was just helping these people um, kind of fight off this threat of fascism that was raising its head again after our great victory in World War II, which is a very important part of contemporary Russian culture and has been a big part of Putin's ideology, kind of the basis of this ideology. And Yeah, and so the media system has changed then. And so for 10 years, you are bombarded by the same narratives and by daily news and stories and commentary about Ukraine. If you went to Russia in 2014 or 2015 and you turned on the evening news, you would be amazed that the 40-minute news program consisted 95% of news about Ukraine, as if you lived in Ukraine, and these were, all was fake news about Ukraine and these fake stories about crucified boys and Nazis and all of these things. And so the majority of the Russian population to this day still tunes in to government news, and some people, some analysts would maybe argue that they don't necessarily believe everything that's there, but they sort of check in to see what is the mainstream view, because you have to be aware of it. And it's better to kind of be in compliance with it. It's safer. This is what the majority of people around you believe. And to be a dissenter in this kind of situation is really hard, because basically people around you just live in this different universe in which everything is actually the opposite. And so if you have one family member um, who lives in this opposite universe, then basically their daily interactions are just full of conflicts, and because anything you say, and at the time it was about Crimea and this conflict in Ukraine, but it was hard to avoid. Everyone was arguing and arguing and arguing, and then people got tired of it, and so they decided not to talk about it, and so they started avoiding it. There was this new wave of depolitization, and what we have now, it's these views are so entrenched. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the sirens.
Oh no, I can't hear him.
Oh, okay, okay. Uh, it's really loud here, and now my dog is howling. Anyway, so basically what's happening now, it's already kind of fairly stable, and people live in these different bubbles, and they try to avoid talking to the people in the other bubble. And if you are someone who gets information from Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, Facebook was and still is very big for liberals in Russia. So this is where they have their conversations. So this is sort of the social media. Now people are leaving Facebook. These liberals are leaving Facebook and maybe also migrating to Telegram because of kind of censorship on Facebook, and now because of this kind of right-wing bent. And so some people think that their posts are sometimes deleted, even in Russian. So anyway, I don't know for sure. But yeah, so if you are a person who needs Twitter, you have a VPN and you use Twitter. But if you never used it, then you never got a VPN and you watch TV and you live in your world.
So I know you said that it's very difficult to express dissent in this not only authoritarian environment, but just because you're sort of ostracized from those close to you if you're expressing dissent, because again, you're living in a different universe. But I would imagine in a country as large as Russia, they are still people who do express dissent. Is is that true? And how do these people express their dissent in this sort of very suffocating environment?
Well, most of them don't. They talk to people they trust, and they have networks of friends and maybe quiet supporters, in Russia. Like I know that in Moscow, there are schools that don't actually follow some of the required programming for children. They're supposed to have these propaganda lessons for children about the war and Russia's greatness, and this updated historical narrative that needs to be popularized among children, so that they grow up with sort of this mindset. But there are schools that just during those lessons they talk about something else. They tone it down a lot, and yeah, so some people can keep living in Russia sort of in these bubbles. They know that their child goes to school that they feel is okay, or maybe they took their kids out of school and they teamed up with a few other parents and they homeschool their children. And the Russian law on education is very liberal. It has not been updated yet. Most likely it will be at some point, and maybe these options will no longer be available to people. But for now, it is possible. And so, those people who are against the war, maybe even actively, passionately against it, they just keep quiet. There are a few people who are public figures and who express open dissent and criticism, and still live in Russia. They have been put on the list of foreign agents. And so they have to follow this complicated bureaucratic procedures. They have to file regular reports about their financial activities. I think they've been cut off from some of the funds and accounts. They cannot be, I think they cannot serve as public speakers. They cannot work in education. So there are all of these restrictions on them. But some of them, like political scientists and journalists, still uh, I still interviewed online, and so they continue work in some form and they continue writing. Um, a lot of these people I eventually arrested and sent to jail. A lot of people are jailed. More and more people are added to these foreign agent lists. Every Friday, there is a new list, and they add 4 or 5 new people and organizations to it. And then a lot of people are exiled. They left, and they can speak openly, but of course they probably um, don't have the same audiences as if they stayed in Russia, because there is a kind of division that a split that appeared between the anti-war Russians who left and even anti-war Russians who stayed, because there is kind of mutual criticism and sometimes mutual envy, for those who left. It's hard to see images of Moscow blooming, seemingly unchanged, with gastropubs and flowers in every street, and it's doing so well. And sometimes people on Facebook or somewhere post that those who left are stupid, because life continues, and they're struggling and trying to find jobs and trying to adapt and learn a new language and all of that, But there's also the envy of those who left, because obviously not everyone could leave, not everyone could adapt. Um, so, and it's a tragic kind of split, because those people who are against the war, obviously the Ukrainian people on the one hand, right? And then all these Russians who are against the war, some of them left because of the war and their dissent, and those who stay and suffer and have to live kind of in this environment of hostility, etc. But they don't see eye to eye, and many of them, feel a lot of sometimes even hatred toward each other, because these are sort of the people that you can reach, and that if you say those words to them, that they will feel some pain, because ultimately the people who are responsible and the people who are fighting in this war and the people who support it or the people who are indifferent, they are not reachable, and there's nothing you can do, and it's been ongoing, and uh, 3.5 years, 4 years of suffering. So
Wow, that is tragic. Uh, it's really hard to believe that that's the reality we're in. Finally, I want to ask you about how how this war has affected Ukrainian families with family members in Russia.
um, it's it depends, I think, but the story that you hear a lot is that the Russian members of the family would refuse to believe the Ukrainian um, members of the family, and from the first days of the war, and the Ukrainians would send the Russians uh, pictures and stories of what is happening, and their family members would say, "You've been brainwashed," and the Russian army is just trying to take out the Nazis, and they never aim at civilian targets, and sort of all of that. And you would think that as the war progressed, that uh, people would find a way to, find some clarity and figure out what's actually going on. But it seems that a lot of the time for the Russians, it is too hard to believe that their country is doing something this unthinkable and this horrible. And because people on both sides of the border have said, um, horrible things to each other and have deeply offended each other in sometimes, their best feelings. And so there's no longer any motivation for people to keep talking to each other. And this has been documented there will be a lot of documentary evidence of this, but there's this documentary film that I recommend called Broken Ties by Andrei Lashak. And the film portrays a few different families, most of them in Russia, some of them already living in immigration, some of them with family members in Russia and outside Russia. And one of the families is a Ukrainian sister and a Russian brother. And they have stopped talking to each other, and this is not unusual at all. Of course, there are examples of the opposite where people live on different sides of the border and they're still talking and they find a way to, still be family.
All right. Well, on that very sad note, I want to take a turn into something a little more fun with the fourth edition now of the Google the Professor quiz. So, question number one: what is your favorite thing about Kharkiv?
As a person who hasn't been to Kharkiv since 2016, I have to say that I can't really claim that, I don't know if I can even claim I am from there anymore, I feel like the city has gone through so much since I last went there. Um, I To me it was a cozy, green, walkable city that at some point developed this passion for coffee, which I share. And so the last few times that I went, we would explore coffee shops and do coffee tastings. But now it has become this unbreakable city that has been under constant bombardment for 3.5 years. And for the first two and a half years, it stayed dark. After dark, no lights, no street lights would be on, because they were hoping that it would um, make it harder for the drones and missiles to hit the city. But eventually, because it doesn't seem that it is helpful, so it has also come back to life in many ways. So it celebrated New Year's and Christmas with lots of lights and with street decorations, and it's half of its population returned. It still has over 1 million people. It's a city right on the border, and so it's truly, turned out to be this amazing, unbreakable city full of life, and I really admire that.
Yeah, that seems like a really awesome symbol of strength for not only Kharkiv, but the whole country. Um, all right. Last question. What is your favorite thing about UMass?
Well, I mean, because I teach at UMass, so my favorite thing probably is the students and the experience of being in the classrooms with people like you know, and uh, I hugely appreciate your, ongoing, continuing interest in these topics, and you're doing this podcast, and it's amazing to see that, you're doing interesting things, and uh, yeah, and I think that's the funnest part of the job, and I'm always curious about what you guys end up doing with your life. But I also love that UMass is constantly changing because I came to UMass more than 10 years ago, and the campus looked very different, and now it's so much more inviting and fun looking and green, and so I love that.
Um, that's a great answer. Thank you. That warms my heart. And thank you for coming on the podcast, taking the time. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. It's been fun having you.
Thank you so much.